Deborah, welcome to our show. I'm very happy to have you. I'm very excited for this episode.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your background? I heard very interesting stories about you, so maybe you can tell us more.
Depending on who told you those stories, it could be true, kind of true, not true at all. But I will tell you a little bit about myself. I was born into a middle class family, but raised from the time I was 8 till I was 16 by an emotionally and physically abusive mother. And my parents split up, and she found herself raising 3 kids. I was the oldest. I had a brother and sister. My brother 18 months younger than I was, and my sister 10 years younger than I was. She was an infant. And so from the time I was very young, I had to learn how to cook and clean and take care of a baby. She kind of became my child because my mother was off in her own headspace, and which was not a very healthy headspace. But I wound up protecting my siblings whenever she would get into her rage modes. She was like an explosion always waiting to happen. You had to really pay attention to her body language because I could always see when it would start to bubble up to the top. And then I would hide my brother and sister and make sure that I was there for the brunt of it. Because if not, then she would go looking for something to take it out on. So school for me was a very painful experience because after my parents split up, we wound up living in the projects. So I was known as a PK kid, which here in the US, a PK kid usually means a preacher's kid. That was far from the case with me. It meant a project kid. And so I got bullied a lot about that. And I had to wear long sleeve shirts and pants throughout the school year because simply to hide the bruises and the cuts that were on my mother had, because when she beat me, it could be a broomstick, it could be anything she could put her hands on. So I carried a lot of bruises. And so it was either getting teased for the bruises or getting teased for the fact of I was wearing, here in Louisiana, during the school year, it is extremely hot. So wearing a long sleeve shirt and pants is just, people didn't do it. So I was made fun of for that. So it was not a very pleasant experience. But I got married at the age of 16, had my first child at 18. And it wasn't until my third daughter was born that I realized I'd married the male version of my mother. He wasn't physically abusive, but he was emotionally abusive. And I wound up divorcing him. Now, I was 16 when I got married, so I still had school to tend to. I had children to raise. I went on to get a degree in marketing from the University of Southwest Louisiana, and realized too, once I got out of school, that I had to really look seriously at what work options were available to me because my then husband informed me that he was going to retire after working for just 2 years. And he was only 4 years older than I was. And so it wasn't that he decided to become a house dad. He was just being a couch dad, where he watched television 24/7. That's where he stayed, in the living room on the couch. And so I wound up being mother and father, had to be the only breadwinner of the family, and attend school to finish to graduate. So it was all pretty stressful. It was pretty stressful environment. I would often work 18 to 20 hour days just to make sure I would make it back home in time for one of my daughters. I had 3 daughters. One of my daughters, either a violin recital or, a play or some event. I wanted to make sure they had a parent there. And I wanted them to have as normal a childhood as possible, which, if I really truly look back now and say that's what I wanted, I would have left that man way before I eventually did. Well, long story short, here comes the divorce. My daughters are getting older now. They're on their own. My youngest was 17. She moved into an apartment. She graduated early, moved into an apartment, and decided she was going to start a career and then think about college after about a year. She wanted to take a break from school. Well, she wound up getting pregnant. And I had a beautiful, beautiful granddaughter born from that. And I would say the first year of that child's birth, I took care of her because my daughter was trying to work things out with one with school and the other with the sperm donor of that child, who was, if not as bad, worse than my ex-husband was. He was very narcissistic. And so I took care of the baby. She lived with me and my new husband, who is the light in my life and has been for 15 years now. She lived with us for a year. So my daughter could get her feet back on the ground. I mean, she saw her daughter every day, but still the main primary care was with us. So it was still about taking care of kids and working a job. And, I worked for a company that at that time, the economy was really tough here. And I worked my way through a transportation company and wound up becoming the first female executive vice president in transportation in the United States. I worked with that company for about 12 years and then left it to start a company of my own. It was a fuel logistics company, something like it did not exist in the US. So people were saying, are you crazy? I was leaving a 6-figure salaried position to go to zero, to go to nothing. And here I was trying to raise my granddaughter and, just push on with life. Now, my new husband was all very supportive because he knew that whatever I put my mind to, it always got accomplished one way or the other. The stars would align or the planets would align or whatever the heck aligns up there, they would align and it would happen. So, and it did. The company went from 0 revenue in 1 year to $2 million in sales. And the company wound up we built it for 25 years. It stayed strong. And we were around the US and Canada. It had grown into an international company and a multi-million-dollar company. Then my life took a major detour. That grandbaby died. She died of, it's not SIDS, but it's a similar acronym for children between 3 and 5 years of age, where they just stop breathing in their sleep. And her mother found her in her crib. And that almost destroyed me. I just didn't know what to do with myself. 4 months after the baby died, my youngest daughter, her mother, died in a fiery car crash. I was leaving the airport for a speaking engagement, and it was my husband, my now husband, my good husband, who was calling. The police had identified her body and contacted him first, so he could break the news to me. So 4 months after I lost my daughter, I couldn't see her at the funeral home. There was closed casket. So there was kind of a disconnect there. It was very hard to believe that that happened. Well, a year after her death, my middle daughter died. She died from alcoholism. She was in AA, doing very well, and her sponsor wound up committing suicide. And when her sponsor committed suicide, she just went downhill fast. My oldest daughter and I saw her beginning to spiral down and tried to stop it and just couldn't. She drank herself into a coma that she never came out of. So a few months after she passed away, my youngest brother died, the one that I protected and kept safe as a child. And then my dad soon after, my dad, who was my best friend. So I was dealing with all of that loss within about a 5-year period of time. And I felt like a shell of a person. Here I was, the type of person that you just, if you fall down, you just get up, brush your behind off and tighten your bootstraps and you just get stepping, you get moving, and I couldn't. It felt like I couldn't breathe, much less continue on with life, quote unquote, in a normal way. What could possibly be normal after all that loss? I resented the world for continuing to revolve around the sun because all these people that I loved in my life were gone. I didn't want to be around any people. I didn't want to exist anymore because my whole purpose in life had been my children, my granddaughter. And now here was this person standing out naked by her, on her own. That's what I felt like. I was standing naked in the middle of a snowstorm, freezing my rear end off and not knowing what to do. No blanket, nothing. And I realized that death took on a whole new meaning for me, because I'm a firm believer that nothing happens by accident. There's a reason, there's a time and a purpose for everything. I couldn't figure out what the hell that reason was with all these deaths, especially for my little granddaughter. But now that I look back and I look at the world we're living in now, I can see she was autistic. I can see how detrimental it would have been for her trying to grow up in a world like we have today. So it was a blessing curse. And as for the rest of my family members that passed on, it was simply, this was the contract that they'd set up the time that they were born. They knew this is how much time you have on this planet. You have these lessons to learn. You either learn them before that time is up or you don't. And I kind of resolved myself to that fact. But everything that I had been doing up to that point would have been to support my daughters, to help them put their feet on the ground, to help them find purpose in life. And also for my grandbaby. Now there was no one to do that for. So I looked at my business and I said, all right, when I die, what is the most significant thing they're going to put on my tombstone? She built a company. She was the first female executive VP in transportation. Whoopie-doo, that's nothing. How does that affect anybody's life? How am I serving humanity at all by doing this, except for providing jobs maybe for other people? But they were smart people. I always hired people smarter than I was, much more apt at things than I was. And so I knew that they would be okay no matter what. So I sold my company. And I went on this soul quest to find out where in the heck my soul was supposed to be in this big world. What was I supposed to be doing? I knew that my time in the corporate America had come to an end. It was time for it to stop and move on, but I didn't know to move on to what. And one day, my husband and I were looking at doing a project on some property that I own in Louisiana. And I was Googling how much gravel would it take to cover a 1 mile stretch of driveway. And I Googled that. And the first thing that popped up was HMI, which is the Hypnosis Motivational Institute. And that was the first, and I read it was the first accredited hypnotherapy college in the United States. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, we have a hypnotherapy school that sells gravel? What is this doing popping up in my feed? And I just clicked on it out of curiosity. Hypnotherapy was the furthest thing from my mind. I started clicking through it. And as I went through their curriculum and through their site, I felt my heart beating a little faster. And I had just this inner voice in my mind that was saying, pay very close attention. This is the path you're to take. And I heard that just as clearly in my mind's ear than I hear anything. This is the path you need to take. Within 8 months, I was enrolled in the school and attended 2 years, got a bachelor's in mind-body psychology, became a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and actually certified in 68 presenting issues. Because when I jumped into that, I jumped in with both feet, the whole body, a whole body belly bust dive, and it was really terrific because it felt like I'd done it before. Everything came very naturally to me. And I was surprised at how easy and how comfortable I was with the whole process. So that's how I went from there to this. And every day I try to expand my knowledge in the different modalities, especially holistic modalities of helping other people. I tell my story. I also created a nonprofit company that targets America's growing illiteracy rate. We have a lot of teens in America that are just not proficient at reading. They have a 6th or 7th grade reading capacity, and our high school graduation percentage keeps decreasing year after year after year.
Right.
So that's something I wanted to tackle, and created a nonprofit. And with that, I was granted the ability to go to high schools around the country and talk to students, auditoriums full of high school students, and tell them the story about a reader and how reading changed my life and how it could change their life just simply by picking up a book. So add that to what I do now in hypnotherapy and in talking to people about mindset shifts and about getting past the limiting beliefs, because from the time we're born to the time we're about 10 years old, all of those limiting beliefs have already supplanted themselves in our subconscious mind, and they're stuck there until we make a conscious effort of rooting them up and out and replacing them with something healthy and confident and forthcoming, so that your life on this planet matters not only to yourself, where you can experience happiness to a greater degree than you've ever experienced before, but every person's life you come into contact with, you can touch, whether it's by a smile, a handshake, a good morning, anything is as simple as that. I think that we're put here to truly help, serve, be an influence to others. We're not just a selfish lot where we just kind of, hum along in our own little bubble, and that's all we've got. I think we're responsible for every person we come in contact with to make a positive. We can either make a positive or a negative impact.
Yeah.
On that person.
Yeah.
So now I will breathe and step off my soapbox and give the floor back to you. You get me cranked up on this stuff, and I can go on and on and on.
No, I can't stop listening to you because your story is very interesting. And yeah, you showed incredible resilience. It was brutal, like brutal conditions and extreme conditions, really, and events happened to you. It's very exceptional the way you dealt with it and how you overcame everything. And now, since like we have very little time left, I want to take some takeaways from you. You mentioned about this self-limiting beliefs and how you deal with them. Also, you said, like, as you were mentioning, that you are a hypnotherapist and you do hypnosis. So hypnosis is about accessing the subconscious, right? But you also
Yes.
mentioned that we can overcome these self-limiting beliefs in the consciously. We can do this consciously. So how would you differentiate between the time where you really need to go to the subconscious, or you can just deal with them consciously and get over it?
It depends on what that unlimiting belief is. For example, if you're someone that looks in the mirror and hates what they see, typically that is a limiting belief that's been planted there by either a caregiver, a parent, your peers in school. It was a limiting belief set a long time ago. It is your choice to look in that mirror and say, you look good today, and be good to yourself. Be okay with yourself. It shouldn't matter to you what other people think about the way you dress. Now, granted, I'm talking about that you're modestly dressed and, you're not wearing a Dr. Zeus hat and everything else. But it's our responsibility, truly, to just say, I'm okay with me. I'm
Mhm.
okay being me. And all this other stuff belongs to somebody else. All those limiting beliefs were planted there by other people, and I don't have to keep them anymore.
Right. Yes. And when do you see the need to get to the subconscious via hypnosis, for example, or hypnotherapy?
Whenever somebody has given it their all in trying to get away from those limiting beliefs and they can't seem to get past it, then I help with hypnosis and going into the subconscious and rooting it out and replacing it with positive affirmations and positive influences.
Yes, yes, this is the most important, of course. So you think that repeating, for example, people do affirmations every morning or something. Do you see this to be effective practically?
No, well, I'm going to say no. That there are people that are going to go, "What are you talking about?" No, I can look in the mirror. I was always told by my mother, felt by my mother, that I was an ugly child.
Uh-huh.
All right, and I could have looked in the mirror back then and gone, "Oh, you're beautiful. You're good. And the other part of me would have said, "Bullshit," it would have just kicked that back at me.
Right.
So it's not just about the affirmations. It's about stopping and realizing where that negative voice is coming from, and the fact that it doesn't belong to you. Is understanding the origin of that voice and saying that belongs to somebody else. It's not mine. It's like picking up a wallet, a purse, or something that belongs to somebody else. Put that puppy down. Put it down. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to somebody else. And then now take possession of what is truly yours. The fact that you're unique and beautiful just the way you are.
Right.
Look at at the wonder of the fact that you were created at all, right?
Yeah.
And created just that way. But the garbage that lives inside of a lot of us is stuff that comes from other people. And we just need to put it down.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that makes very much sense. And it is very useful for too many people, I think, that are struggling with these self-limiting beliefs. So thank you so much, Deborah, for these insights and this incredible story. I would look forward for more conversations with you because I believe you have a lot more to offer. And from what we saw from your experience, it's really extensive. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.